Alright, what's up everybody? So we're taking a look just like last video at starter decks. So today we're going to do water decks because, well, someone commented they want the water deck next and I'm going in no particular order. So let's just go jump in just like with Earth, take a look at water, and then we'll upgrade it after the fact towards the end of the video. So starting with water, we'll start just with the core Ascension line of the deck. We have Sluggo, which is 2/2. Whenever you cast it, you can turn up to 3 water, from your Underworld to your Spirit deck. Glaubby is a 4/8 for 2. If it has 3 water on it, you can special ascend it into a Majesea from your hand or deck. And then Majesea is a 3 cost 6/14 and gets 1 attack for every enchanting water on your side of the field. And water enchanted Elestrals cannot be targeted by opponent's Elestral effects. So generally the idea to get that out is to ramp it out by getting an extra water spirit onto a 1-drop and then ascend the 1-drop into Glaubby, or to just get an extra water spirit on a 1-drop, ascend straight into Majesea if it's in your hand. That's the core idea of how to play the Majesea deck. So how are we going to get there? So Sluggle's not a super defensive body, doesn't quite fit into the archetype that it's of the deck, but it's good recovering water. We don't hate it there. The rest of the deck is going to be pretty defensive because we want to get to that 2 spirits on a 1-drop, or basically we just want to get to 2 spirits that we can enchant to get Glaubby to Majesea, or just to Majesea anyway. Maltuga is a 2/5 body. It'll let us search out only Wormite in the deck, which is a little weird, but it's a 5 defense body. It should stick on board. It should hopefully be able to ascend into either Krakatuga or Glaubby without issue. Other defensive cards, we have Foamy is a great defensive card. It'll let you search out any other water 1-drop. Makes it a very sticky kind of deck, so you can just maybe stick a Foamy for a turn and then ascend that Foamy into a 2-drop. Aphros is a decent defensive body at 4. It's also an insanely strong draw engine, where for every water you nexus with it, you draw a card. So if you get a Poseidon play early, you can basically nexus to Aphros, nexus back to Poseidon, draw some cards, nexus 2 to Aphros, draw some cards. Aphros is a great way to get to that extra water spirit to enchant into Glaubby or Majesea. It's also just a great draw engine in general. Elestrals is not super tested, not a ton of people played it consistently, but it is a really big defensive body. If you have Atlantis out, it gets 6 defense. Otherwise, it's usually going to have about 4 or 5 defense, making a decent wall in most cases, and it combos well with Galaxy, which we'll get to in a moment. Station 1/6 defense wall. Again, this deck is very defensive. It's trying to get to 2-drops pretty consistently. Station's one of the best 1-drops to just wall attackers. And then we have Galaxy, which is our first of 2 kind of subcategories in the deck. Galaxy will swap all of our water enchanted Elestrals attack and defenses, so all these high defenses with Galaxy in play will all of a sudden become high attacks, allowing us to go from a very defensive board into just full-on attack mode, which could be useful. The caution you have to have with Galaxy is if they remove the Galaxy, all your low attack, high defense Elestrals will go back to being low attack, and if you put them in attack position to attack with the Galaxy, you're going to be in trouble. But Galaxy is a great card. It's basically a 5/2. We don't really care about its 5 defense, other than the fact that it's going to turn to its attack. Now, I did skip over Krakatuga a second ago. That is kind of the secondary, or the second of the secondary win cons in this deck. Again, this deck's very defensive, so Krakatuga gives you a burn win condition, as well as some eruptions that we find a little bit lower in the deck, which we'll get to in a second. Krakatuga is another defensive just burn option that you can play Krakatuga defensively and just throw damage at your opponent directly without attacking. He's just another solid defensive 2-drop that can win you the game over a couple turns, which is nice to have. So this deck is really heavily focused on getting out Glaubby or Krakatuga and then going into either Majesea, or sticking the Krakatuga with the backup plan of kind of going aggressive with your defensive attacks. Wormite in the deck is only searchable by Smeltuga. As I mentioned, it's kind of weird, but Wormite's a nice kind of attack removal. We have all really low attack stats except for potentially Majesea in the deck, or Majesea when it flips its stats around. So Wormite's a nice inclusion to hopefully get over some early attackers of our opponent. Peliquarius will search out our water cards. It's just decent overall. Because it's out of element of water and being in wind, it doesn't It doesn't play as well as, say, Rummagem, which searches an element, but searching out of element's fine when we can just run a couple Wind Spirits, not the end of the world. Core cards, Nectar God, Ambrosia, Circle the Sky. Circle the Sky does actually have some pretty good uses in this deck when you can use Circle with Poseidon to kind of bounce spirits back and forth and just cantrip for cards. It helps you also potentially stack some more spirits onto cards to then ascend into Glauby or Majesty with. Circle Sky is actually a really nice fit in this deck. It wasn't so much in the Earth deck. In Water, it's pretty solid. Now, I keep talking about Poseidon. The reason Poseidon is so core to Water strategy is Water really likes to get to 2s and 3s really fast, and Poseidon's a way to really easily accelerate to those 3 costs. But on its own, Poseidon generally is only kind of an aggressive play card where you're stacking extra spirits and stuff. Hopefully use Poseidon to Nexus to something to then attack over something, deal some more damage. You really want to use them mostly for just pumping the team or getting to Majesty and stuff like that. And I say pumping the team because next card's Atlantis, get some more spirits on stuff, make them bigger. It's a nice little combo niche with Atlantis. And then we have Trident of Poseidon, probably one of the best cards in the deck. When you pair it with Poseidon in play, it shuts off all counter runes for your opponent, but not yourself, making it really, really good. If you can stick a Trident of Poseidon on a Majesty, they can't remove the Majesty with Celestial effects, and they won't be able to use counter runes to disrupt it, leaving them with just Laurels and Earthquake to manage your Majesty. So that's a nice combo in this deck. Tsunami is Tsunami. It's a great card, and especially if you're playing against other starter decks. There's not a ton of water in most of the starter decks, so Tsunami is a great kind of card to disrupt any other starter deck. And in constructed play, Tsunami is pretty good. Eruption is generally a weak-ish card. It's great in a burn fire deck if your opponent can't play any of the fire cards. And with Krakatuga, it allows you to basically just destroy stuff and burn stuff. It's a nice little 1-2 with Krakatuga. Tornado's in here as a one-of because there's some wind in here because of Pel Aquarius. Tornado's not super relevant, but I guess it'll help you like blow back one rune before you go in for an attack with Majesty if you don't have Trident in play. An option. And 2 shields. Shields is always a nice card. Bounces Elestrals that are attacking. Solid card. And that's what's in the deck. So, the core focus is a very defensive deck. One of the main concerns people had going with the Water starter deck is the Water prototype deck was not super powerful. Now, some of these cards compared to the Water proto deck got some buffs and some nerfs, like Aphros got nerfs. Oysteress I don't believe was in the proto starter deck. But Water's definitely in a better spot here. The Krakatuga fits better in the deck with the 2 Krakatuga and 2 Eruptions than the proto deck. So I think you have a solid defensive deck. I wouldn't necessarily call it control, but if you play like Magic the Gathering, it's kind of like an Arcady Sabbath style deck where you're just playing big defensive walls and then swapping them to attack and do that shenanigans, or playing defensive and throwing stuff with Krakatuga. From a value perspective, what you get in this deck, Majesty sees some okay, decent play. Like Water Ramp is pretty consistent. Water has a lot of really solid cards that see play in a lot of other decks. Moltuga sees a decent amount of play in actually 5 attack with the ability to just pull out like Necrufs and such. Foamy is in basically 3 of every water deck, which is nice. Krakatuga sees some niche play. Aphros is pretty strong, but only kind of sees niche play in mono water decks, and mono water decks on their own aren't usually super powerful. Oysteress doesn't see a ton of play. Mestation sees some tech play as just a random defensive card in some side decks where you can just swap it in against aggressive decks to just wall them off for a turn or 2. Galaxy is pretty strong. It's core to a lot of the water decks. And then you have Nectar Gods, Ambrosia, Circle Sky. All those cards, they don't see a ton of... Well, Nectar Gods and Ambrosia see a ton of play, but they're going to be in all the starter decks everywhere. They shouldn't be too problematic to get your hands on. But Trident of Poseidon and Poseidon are going to... Those 2 cards are used corely in a lot of different decks, and this is the easiest way to get Poseidon, and the easiest way to get Trident Poseidon. Although Trident Poseidon being an uncommon, you can find them pretty decently common in the booster boxes, but getting the Poseidon to combo with Trident Poseidon, super relevant. It's great you have both in here, and you're going to want both if you're playing one or the other. Tsunami, everyone's going to play it. It's going to be everywhere. It's good to nice to have. Shield Achilles, you'll get in the booster boxes. It's going to be nice to have. Eruption, Tornadoes, you're going to be in the booster boxes. They'll be easy to get. they don't see a ton of play right now. So the value of this deck isn't super high, but there are some nice pieces in the deck to kind of, if you want to play water, picking this up was a good choice. You just have to round it out with some of the cards. That being said, we can go check out the upgrades kind of section that I have. And again, just like before, we're doing this in what if I bought 2 water starter decks. I'm going to mash them together. That is the list you see right now. And then we're going to see what happens if I only bought 5 starter decks. And then what happens if I bought starter decks and a booster box. Roughly what could I make? So starting with the 2x starter decks, we have a pretty solid water ramp base here. We pushed the Glauby up to 3, the Sluggle down by 1, because we don't need a ton of recovery in the deck. And we don't need Sluggle to get to Glauby. And we're trying to keep the core Majesea gameplay here. So having 3 Glauby, 2 Majesea is a pretty consistent way to get to Majesea. We took all of our defensive cards still, so we still have that Galaxy, which is a nice attacker. Aphros is a great draw engine. We took 2 Circle of Skies because we're going to want that Nexus if we get Poseidon in play to just move stuff around. Oystress, more defense. Station, more defense. Foamy, defensive. Search for our other cards. You can always use Foamy to search for Aphros, play another card, draw some stuff. Nice engine there. 1 of a Peliquarius, 3 Nectar Gods for consistency. 3 of our Poseidon Triad Poseidon combo because, as I mentioned previously, they're very good. 3 Shield of Achilles because Shield of Achilles is great. 3 Tsunami, Tsunami's great. 2 Tornado because having the extra Rune Disruption before we go for combos if we don't get our Trident Poseidon in play. It's nice to have more options to remove back row before going for our big Majesea plays. Really focus around Majesea with this deck setup. It would be nice to have 3 Tadpuffs. Tadpuff is not in the starter decks. It's super easy to get in the booster boxes. So if I were to make any major changes from this list here, I'd probably take out the Peliquarius and maybe an Oystress or 2 and put in 3 Tadpuff. And then probably drop Tornado for Gorgon's Gaze. Take the wind completely out. Possibly add some Earthquakes or Laurels or something in there. But generally, this is a pretty solid start to a ramp deck. Really, if you take this list and add 3 Tadpuff to it somewhere, it'll be even better. You don't need a 3rd Majesea. You could potentially use a 3rd Majesea, and overall, the deck works. This is probably the best of the 3 decks I'm about to show you, but there's still some options. Moving from this deck, we're going to look at what happens if you have 5 starter decks, and I couldn't figure it out. Trying to make a Majesea-focused deck out of the 5 starter decks doesn't really work. There's not enough tools that match what Water is trying to do, since Water's kind of niche on the big defensive water stuff. So I kind of transitioned it from just a pure Majesea ramp deck into a Majesea Krakatuga deck with a little bit of 5 attack strategy mixed in. So one of the things that 5 attack decks like to do is they like to play Smeltuga to find a Necruff. And then you can play Galaxy in a turn or 2 later to just get a lot of 5 attacks out because you turn the Smeltuga into 5 attack. So that way you kind of have a lot of big attack stuff, big beaters. We were able to add 2 Vertaquas from, I think, the Thunder deck. The Vertaqua's a great card with Tsunami. So there's some upgrades here. It just feels like this version of just taking 5 starter decks and mashing them into a deck doesn't work as much for the water deck. If you're focusing on Krakatuga, we got that 3rd Eruption. You can still play a little defensively, maybe play for the Eruption and Krakatuga stuff. One kind of niche little fun thing is we did get Bag of Winds out of the Wind deck, because if we get Trident Poseidon, and Bag of Winds all on a Majesea, that Majesea is pretty much not removable and is going to be a huge attacker. Which there's other decks that would be easier to do that with in Constructed. But this is a nice way to kind of, hey, you can put Bag of Winds on either Krakatuga or Majesea if you get them out, and feel good about it because they're going to be tough to remove now, and they will be threats on their own. So this is a mix of like an aggressive defensive deck. I really couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with all 5 starter decks, focusing on a water / Majesea deck, and it just kind of turned into Krakatuga / Majesea / 5 attack / stall defense. It's weird. This is probably the worst of the 3 decks I'm showing you, but I tried here. I spent quite a bit trying to make this deck work, and I couldn't find a way to make Majesea work with just getting 1 of each starter deck. that problem pretty much gets fixed for starter deck plus boxes, right? So I did want to, as I mentioned in the starter deck ×2 deck build a few moments ago, all that deck really needs is to add Tadpuff. So in this deck, we added 3 Tadpuff. Right in the middle, you see the Tadpuff there. And this, it's like starter deck plus box deck I made, and when I say plus a box, that's basically saying we're having only one additional of each rare available to us, and unlimited rares and commons and uncommons, no full arts. So we were able to get a third Krakatuga, 3 Tadpuffs, and some other various cards. So this is a little bit more focused on Krakatuga because I wanted to make a Krakatuga deck, because I think Krakatuga has a lot of potential. You still have the option to go Majesea ramp, but we only have 2 Clouby and 1 Majesea, which still go great with Tadpuff. The consistency issue is with only 2 Poseidon. 3 Afros does kind of help with the Nexus strategy, but generally what this deck is doing is either going kind of pure defensive, going for 2 drops, either being Krakatuga or Clouby, getting an extra spirit or so on them, and then just using them to win the game. So either Majesea to just go kind of attack brutally hard, yada yada yada, or Krakatuga again to just, we can Tadpuff into Krakatuga on turn 1 by specialing the Tadpuff out, and maybe throw Eruption to burn our opponent, use Krakatuga's ability to burn our opponent. So this deck works better with Krakatuga, but it's still a solid, just kind of water ramp deck, I think. And I think this deck is a lot of fun to play. I've played versions of this deck without the Majesea, but this is the Majesea starter deck, and we got to keep it in to some degree. So it's a little bit of a mix. It does run a lot of 2 drops, so we have an extra draw card with Leaf to help cycle our 2 drops away if we don't need them. 3 extra gods, draw cards. I know I'm all over the place with this deck. The core strategy is get Tadpuff into play turn 1, ascend into Krakatuga or Glauby, or play a little bit more defensively, play a Foamy to go find like an Afros to draw some cards and then ascend. There's options here. I do like this deck. I think it's a lot of fun. So that's pretty much the water starter deck overview. It's better than it was. There's a lot of potential with the 2 starter deck and the starter deck plus box, or even just making a water deck in general out of the booster boxes. But trying to make a water deck and you only have access to 5 starter decks, you're going to have a rough time. Just be aware. But other than that, this is the end of the video, and I'll see you guys with the next element. Before I go, what element do you guys want to see next? As I mentioned before, I took a suggestion to do water next. So we have thunder, wind, and fire up for grabs. Let me know below what you want to see, and I'll see you guys next video. Peace.